Joining me now, Main Street columnist for the Wall Street Journal, Bill McGurn. Bill, it's always great to see you, and I can't wait to get your take on this, because essentially what we do know here is that Elon Musk broadcasted the fact he was going to be laying people off. He has two jobs as he is at the helm of Twitter. He has to make this a more profitable company, and he also has to make sure that the employees that were working in the old regime, when there were bots and things that weren't working with respect to censorship, that they no longer have the power to do that anymore. So to that employee, while it's always difficult to lose a job, to be very shell-shocked by this seems a little surprising to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of corporate America. You have to hope your company makes money, and then you can keep your job. Look, I don't know what you would do with $44 billion, but if I invested $44 billion, I'd want it to make money. That's what he's trying to do. And there's two ways to make money: cut down on expenses and expand revenue streams. I think the example of the latter is charging people $8 a month for a blue check. And maybe the other is part of keeping down expenses. You know, a lot of people think he overpaid for it. If that's true, that means they have a lot of overhead that they have to get rid of. And, you know, nobody's entitled to a job. You and I could be let go tomorrow if they think they can't afford us, or the paper or channel isn't making money. So no one should be shocked by that. It's painful to the individual. But, you know, some of these people seem to be want a guarantee of a lifetime job. And also, let's be frank, a lot of the opposition to Elon Musk seems to be based on the idea of politics, that he's not someone they can count on to suppress news and so forth.
Yeah. And actually, I just will point out the fact that he's going to, giving some people very generous severance packages as well. It's not like they're going to be completely cut off from their paycheck, to give them some time to rebound. Now, you mentioned this idea of making money. How does he make money? He makes money by either cutting costs, right, or raising ad revenues. But that's going to prove to be a little bit difficult, at least initially, because as Connell points out, you've got these big name companies that are pausing to see what happens. You know, is Elon going to break Twitter or make it more broken than it already is? Conservatives certainly don't think so, but some of these companies want to see what happens. Your thoughts if too many companies get on board and pull the ads?
Well, I think that's a problem, but I also think if you create what he wants to create, a digital town or a town square where people can exchange ideas in a civil manner, that's a value, and I think people will want to be there. So also, I think what he's trying to do, you mentioned ad revenues. They're very important, but he's trying to find other streams that would, get him through rough times, like the $8 a month for the blue check, just as cable news has subscription as well as ad revenues, and so does the Journal. So I think he's looking at all ways to do that. I think we should wish him well. Again, a lot of this seems to be politically motivated, and I hope it passes by. I hope he irons out all these kinks in the beginning, and it prospers.
And I will just make the point as well that not only would charging for the blue check mark bring in additional ad revenue, it also would require a human being to go with a physical credit card to pay the $8, which would indicate also, Bill, that you're not a bot. And that was one of the things that he wants to remove from the platform to make it better. So, we'll be watching to see how it plays out. I think he's a very smart guy. I think taking the company private, even if he overpaid, he will probably still hit it out of the park if he executes properly. And people don't, get in his way. Just real quick final thought.
I think when you spend $44 billion, you have definite ideas what you want to do to create value. And I think he has a track record of success, and he's in a very new field, and I wish him well.
And we will watch and see and continue to monitor all the tweeting around it. Bill McGurn, thank you so much. Have a great weekend, sir.
Thanks, Jackie.